The autumn air hung heavy over Kensington Palace as Prince William stood by the window, watching the leaves fall from ancient oak trees. For 20 years, he had carried the weight of knowledge that few in the royal family possessed. His hands trembled slightly as he held the letter that had arrived that morning, unmarked and delivered through channels that bypassed normal palace protocol. The letter contained only 5 words. "She knows you know everything." William's mind raced back to that pivotal day in 2003 when he had accidentally discovered documents in his father's study at Highgrove House. He had been looking for estate papers when a folder marked Private C had fallen from behind other files. What he found inside had changed his perception of everything he thought he knew about his stepmother, Camilla Parker Bowles. The documents revealed a carefully orchestrated plan that dated back to 1995, years before his mother Diana's tragic death. They showed correspondence between Camilla and a prominent media figure, outlining strategies to gradually shift public opinion. More disturbing were the financial records showing substantial payments to various journalists and photographers who had been instrumental in shaping narratives about the royal family during the most tumultuous years. William had been only 21 when he made this discovery. The young prince had faced an impossible choice: confront his father and risk destroying the fragile peace that had finally settled over the family, or remain silent and carry the burden alone. He had chosen silence, believing it was what his mother would have wanted for the sake of his younger brother Harry and the stability of the monarchy. But now, 2 decades later, everything was about to change. The palace had been in crisis mode for weeks. Leaked recordings had surfaced, suggesting irregularities in several charitable foundations associated with the Duchess of Cornwall. The press, usually respectful of the senior royals, had begun asking uncomfortable questions. William knew that these leaks were just the tip of an iceberg that threatened to sink the entire institution. His wife Catherine had noticed his increasing distress. She would find him in his study late at night, staring at old photographs of his mother, lost in thought. Their children had begun asking why Papa seemed so sad. William had always prided himself on being able to compartmentalize his royal duties from his role as a father. But this secret was consuming him. The turning point had come during a state dinner the previous week. Camilla, now queen consort, had made a comment about difficult women who didn't understand their place in history. The remark, seemingly innocent to others, had been directed at William with a pointed look. She knew that he knew, and she was testing him. That night, William had confided in Catherine for the first time, in their private apartments, away from the listening ears of staff and security. He had shown her copies he had made of the documents all those years ago. Catherine had wept, not just for the betrayal they represented, but for the burden her husband had carried alone for so long. "You have to tell someone," she had urged him. "This is destroying you." William had nodded, knowing she was right. The next morning, he had requested a private meeting with his father, King Charles III. The meeting had been scheduled for the following week, but events were moving faster than anticipated. The media storm intensified when a former palace employee came forward with allegations about financial improprieties dating back to the early 2000s. The employee claimed to have evidence of a secret fund used to influence media coverage and silence potential whistleblowers. The palace's initial response had been standard denial. But William knew that this former employee had been present during some of the most sensitive periods. As he stood by the window that autumn morning, William made a decision that would change the course of royal history. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never used. It connected him directly to the Prime Minister's office. "This is the Prince of Wales," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. "I need to arrange an urgent meeting regarding a matter of constitutional importance." The die was cast. There would be no going back. That evening, as the sun set over London, William sat down at his desk and began writing. Not an official statement, but a personal account of everything he had discovered and kept hidden. He wrote about the pain of losing his mother, the complexity of accepting his father's happiness with Camilla, and the impossible position of knowing truths that could damage the institution he was born to serve. He wrote about specific incidents that had puzzled him as a young man but made sense once he had seen those documents. The unexpected changes in palace staff, who had been loyal to Diana, the sudden shift in media narratives, the mysterious disappearance of certain items from his mother's belongings. As his pen moved across the paper, William felt a strange sense of liberation. The secret that had been slowly poisoning him was finally being expelled. He thought of his children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, and the monarchy they would inherit. Did he have the right to protect an institution built on such deception, or did he have a greater duty to the truth? His phone buzzed with a message from his private secretary. The Prime Minister would see him the next morning at Downing Street. The meeting would be completely off the record, with no official log of his visit. William smiled grimly. Even in seeking truth, the machinery of secrecy continued to turn. He sealed the pages he had written in an envelope and placed them in his private safe. Whatever happened next, there would be a record of his truth. As he prepared for bed, William caught sight of a photograph on his dresser, his mother holding him and Harry as young boys, all three laughing at some forgotten joke. He touched the frame gently. "I'm sorry it took so long, Mummy," he whispered, "but I can't stay silent anymore." The next morning would begin a sequence of events that would shake the monarchy to its foundations. But that night, for the first time in 20 years, Prince William slept peacefully, unburdened by the weight of his secret. The black car glided through the early morning London streets, taking a circuitous route to avoid the usual royal watchers. Prince William sat in the back, his protection officer beside him, both men silent. The weight of what was about to unfold pressed upon them like the gray clouds gathering overhead. At 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister waited in a private study, away from the formal reception rooms. When William entered, the usual protocols were abandoned. This was not a meeting between the Prince of Wales and the head of government, but between two people facing a crisis that could redefine British history. "Your Royal Highness," the Prime Minister began, but William raised his hand. "Given what I'm about to tell you, perhaps we should dispense with formalities," William said, taking a seat across from the Prime Minister. From his briefcase, he produced a folder that had remained locked away for 2 decades. For the next 2 hours, William laid out everything. The documents showing financial transactions, the correspondence revealing media manipulation, the systematic campaign to discredit and isolate his mother in her final years. Most damning were the papers suggesting that certain members of the establishment had actively worked to ensure Diana would be portrayed as unstable and paranoid, even as they orchestrated the very situations that drove her to distress. The Prime Minister's face grew increasingly grave as each page was examined. These weren't the unfounded conspiracy theories that had swirled for years, but documented evidence with names, dates, and transactions that could be verified. "And Camilla's role in all of this?" the Prime Minister asked carefully. William's jaw tightened. She was not merely a passive beneficiary. She was an active participant. These documents show she coordinated with certain figures to plant stories, arranged for photographers to be in specific locations, and, most troubling, maintained a fund that was used to silence palace staff who might have spoken out about what they witnessed. The Prime Minister stood and walked to the window, processing the implications. "You understand what this means if it becomes public?" "I understand perfectly," William replied. "The monarchy as we know it may not survive, but I have 3 children who will one day inherit this institution. How can I hand them a crown built on such deception?" Meanwhile, at Buckingham Palace, an emergency had erupted. The King's private secretary had received word that William had gone to Downing Street without informing the palace. Camilla, sensing danger, had demanded an immediate audience with her husband. "Charles, something is terribly wrong," she said, pacing in his private study. "William knows something. He's been different since the state dinner. The way he looked at me." The King, showing his 70-plus years more than ever, slumped in his chair. "Perhaps it's time, Camilla. We've lived with secrets for too long." Camilla whirled on him. "Time for what? To destroy everything we've built? To let Diana win from beyond the grave?" "She was the mother of my children," Charles said quietly, "and they deserve the truth." "The truth?" Camilla's voice rose. "The truth is that I loved you when she didn't. The truth is that I stood by you when she was gallivanting with playboys and embarrassing the crown. Everything I did for us, for the stability of the monarchy." "Everything you did," Charles repeated slowly. "My God, Camilla, what exactly did you do?" Before she could answer, the King's private secretary entered with an urgent message. The Prime Minister was requesting an immediate audience with His Majesty. The subject was listed simply as "Constitutional Matter, Urgent." Back at Downing Street, William and the Prime Minister had been joined by the Attorney General and the head of the security services. The documents were being photographed and verified. The constitutional implications were staggering. "We have several options," the Attorney General outlined. "We could treat this as a historical matter, sealed under the Official Secrets Act, or we could launch a full investigation, though that would inevitably become public." William spoke firmly. "I didn't come here to bury this deeper. I came here because the truth needs to be known, but in a way that protects the innocent and maintains stability for the nation." The Prime Minister nodded thoughtfully. "There is a third option, a controlled disclosure. We form a private commission of inquiry, including senior judges and constitutional experts. They review everything, and then we decide how to proceed based on their recommendations." As these discussions continued, Catherine was at Kensington Palace, maintaining normalcy for their children, while her heart raced with anxiety. She had received a coded message from William that the meeting was going as planned. But she knew that by the end of this day, their lives would be forever changed. She thought about the British people, who had embraced her as their future queen. How would they react to learning that the fairy tale they had been sold was built on systematic deception? How would they feel about Camilla, who had transformed her image from reviled mistress to respected queen consort through what now appeared to be calculated manipulation? At Windsor Castle, Prince Harry received an encrypted video call from his brother. Harry, who had his own complicated history with the royal family and had stepped back from duties, listened in stunned silence as William explained why he had requested this urgent communication. "Harry, I know things have been difficult between us," William said, his image flickering slightly on the secure connection. "But you're my brother, and you deserve to know what I've discovered about the circumstances surrounding Mum's final years." Harry's residence in California suddenly felt very far from the drama unfolding in London. "William, I've been saying for years that something wasn't right. Everyone called me paranoid, said I was being dramatic." "You weren't wrong," William admitted. "I've had proof all along, and I'm sorry I didn't share it with you. I thought I was protecting you, protecting the family. But I see now that secrets like these only fester and poison everything they touch." The brothers talked for an hour, their longest conversation in years. Old wounds began to heal as the truth created a bridge between them that years of misunderstanding had failed to build. By afternoon, the king had arrived at Downing Street for his meeting with the Prime Minister. William was asked to join them, creating an unprecedented situation. Father and son, king and heir, facing each other across a table laden with evidence of betrayal. Charles aged visibly as he reviewed the documents his son had hidden for 20 years. His hands shook as he recognized Camilla's handwriting on several key papers. The elaborate scheme was laid bare, and with it, the uncomfortable truth that while he had been manipulated, he had also been willfully blind to signs that should have alarmed him. "I loved your mother, William," Charles said, tears flowing freely. "But I loved Camilla too. I thought I could have both, keep everyone happy. I see now the terrible price of that delusion." William reached across the table and took his father's hand. "Dad, I don't blame you for loving her. I blame her for what she did to Mum, and I blame the system that allowed it to happen." The Prime Minister cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, we need to discuss how to proceed. This information will eventually become public, one way or another. We can control the narrative, or we can let it explode uncontrolled." Charles straightened, showing the steel that had made him wait decades for the throne. "My son has shown courage in bringing this forward. I will not dishonor that courage with more deception. We will have the inquiry. We will face whatever consequences come." "And the Queen Consort?" the Prime Minister asked delicately. Charles's face was a mask of pain. "She will have to answer for her actions, as we all will." As the sun set over London, the wheels of revelation were set in motion. The palace communications team was quietly briefed to prepare for an unprecedented announcement. Senior royals were recalled from their engagements. The Archbishop of Canterbury was consulted about the spiritual implications of what was to come. William returned to Kensington Palace to find Catherine waiting for him. She had put the children to bed and dismissed the staff. In the privacy of their home, he collapsed into her arms, the emotion of the day finally overwhelming him. "You did the right thing," she whispered, holding him close. "Your mother would be proud." "I hope so," William replied, "because tomorrow, everything changes." Indeed, as night fell over Britain, a secret that had been buried for 2 decades was about to resurrect itself, bringing with it consequences that would echo through generations. The monarchy had survived scandals before, but never one that cut so deep into its very heart. In her private apartments, Camilla sat alone, having been informed by Charles of what had transpired. She poured herself a drink with steady hands, her face betraying no emotion. She had always known this day might come. The only surprise was that it had taken William so long to find his courage. She picked up her phone and dialed a number from memory. "It's me," she said when the call was answered. "The boy has finally spoken. Implement the contingency plan. The game was not over yet." Camilla had not survived decades of public hatred and palace intrigue without learning how to fight. If William thought she would go quietly, he had gravely underestimated his stepmother. The battle for the truth, and for the soul of the monarchy, was about to begin. The dawn of the new day brought with it a media frenzy, unlike anything Britain had seen since Diana's death. Though the palace had not yet made any official announcement, rumors of William's visit to Downing Street had leaked. Royal correspondents who had cultivated sources for decades found their contacts suddenly unavailable. Something monumental was happening behind the palace walls. Camilla's contingency plan swung into action with military precision. Within hours, several prominent journalists received anonymous packages containing what appeared to be evidence of William's own indiscretions. Fabricated documents suggesting financial irregularities in his charitable foundations, and edited photographs implying inappropriate relationships. It was a desperate smear campaign, but Camilla had learned long ago that the best defense was often a ruthless offense. However, William had anticipated this move. Working with the security services through the night, they had traced the source of these packages to a public relations firm with long-standing ties to Camilla. The trap had been set, and she had walked right into it. At Buckingham Palace, an extraordinary meeting of the Accession Council was convened. Though typically reserved for the proclamation of a new monarch, the ancient body had been called to address what the Lord President termed a constitutional crisis of unprecedented proportions. King Charles, looking haggard but resolute, addressed the assembly. "My lords and ladies, we gather today not to celebrate continuity, but to confront a cancer that has been growing within our institution for decades. It is with profound sadness that I must inform you of evidence that has come to light regarding systematic deception and manipulation at the highest levels of the royal household." The silence in the ancient hall was deafening. Some members of the council had suspected for years that something was amiss, but to hear it confirmed by the king himself was shocking beyond measure. Meanwhile, William and Catherine made an unexpected decision. Rather than remain secluded in Kensington Palace, they chose to carry out their scheduled engagement at a children's hospital in East London. The symbolism was clear. While the palace burned with scandal, the future of the monarchy would continue to serve the people. The crowds that gathered were larger than usual, their faces reflecting a mixture of support and confusion. William, with Catherine at his side, spoke to as many people as possible, his message consistent: "The truth will make us stronger." Inside the hospital, away from the cameras, William met with a young patient who was fighting leukemia. The boy, no more than 8 years old, looked up at the prince and asked innocently, "Are you sad today? You look sad." William knelt beside the bed, his eyes glistening. "Sometimes, doing the right thing makes us sad at first, but it's still the right thing to do." The boy nodded solemnly, understanding in the way children often do when adults speak from the heart. Back at the palace, Camilla's world was crumbling. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her attempts to counterattack had only provided more proof of her guilt. Charles had moved out of their shared apartments, unable to face the woman he had loved but who had deceived him so profoundly. In a last-ditch effort, Camilla requested a private audience with William. Against the advice of his security team and advisors, he agreed to meet her in the blue drawing room, the same place where she had first been formally introduced to him and Harry all those years ago. "You've destroyed everything," Camilla said, abandoning all pretense of warmth. "Your father, the monarchy, our family. All for what? A ghost? A woman who's been dead for nearly 30 years? William remained calm, his voice steady. "My mother died believing she was paranoid and unstable, when in reality, she was being systematically gaslit by people she should have been able to trust. You didn't just betray her, Camilla. You betrayed all of us." "I gave your father happiness," Camilla shot back. "I gave stability to the crown. Everything I did was for the greater good." The greater good. William's composure finally cracked. You isolated a vulnerable woman, manipulated the press to destroy her reputation, and drove her to the edge of despair. And for what? So you could wear a crown? Camilla straightened, her chin raised defiantly. That crown was always meant to be mine. Diana was an interloper, a pretty face who didn't understand what it meant to support a future king. I did what was necessary, and now you'll face the consequences of what was necessary, William replied, turning to leave. The inquiry begins tomorrow. I suggest you find a very good lawyer. As William reached the door, Camilla called out one last time. Your mother wasn't the saint you think she was, William. She had her own secrets, her own manipulations. One day you'll understand that everyone in this palace plays the game. William paused but didn't turn back. Perhaps. But she never played it against her own children. That's the difference between a mother and a stepmother who saw us only as obstacles to remove. The public announcement came that evening. The Prime Minister and the King appeared together in an unprecedented joint address to the nation. They revealed that serious allegations had been made regarding historical misconduct within the royal household, and that a full inquiry would be launched immediately. The King spoke with visible emotion. The monarchy exists to serve the people of this nation with integrity and honor. When we fall short of those ideals, we must have the courage to confront our failures and make amends. I ask for your patience and your trust as we navigate these difficult waters. The reaction was immediate and polarizing. Social media exploded with theories and opinions. Diana's supporters felt vindicated after years of being dismissed as conspiracy theorists. Camilla's carefully cultivated image crumbled overnight as the hashtag #JusticeForDiana began trending worldwide. International reaction was equally dramatic. Leaders from around the world expressed shock at the revelations. The Commonwealth realms began discussing whether this scandal might be the catalyst for Republican movements that had been simmering for years. Harry and Meghan flew immediately to London, their previous conflicts with the royal family temporarily set aside in the face of this larger crisis. The reunion between the brothers was emotional, taking place privately at Frogmore Cottage, where they had spent so many happy times as children. I should have told you, William said, embracing his brother. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that secrets are just another form of control. Harry, tears streaming down his face, held his brother tight. We were both trying to protect each other from the truth, but Mum would want us united now, facing this together. The inquiry, led by a panel of distinguished judges and constitutional experts, began its work immediately. Witnesses were called, documents examined, and slowly, the full picture emerged. It was worse than even William had known. The manipulation had extended beyond media relationships to include interference with Diana's staff, her medical care, and even her security arrangements. One particularly damning revelation came from a former protection officer who testified that Diana's security had been deliberately compromised on several occasions to create situations where she would appear reckless or irresponsible. The officer had been threatened into silence at the time but now felt compelled to speak. As the evidence mounted, Camilla's legal team advised her to negotiate a settlement. In exchange for avoiding criminal prosecution, she would relinquish all titles and privileges, agree to a permanent separation from the king, and retire from public life entirely. The terms were harsh but fair, considering the alternative. The effect on King Charles was profound. The man who had waited decades to be king found himself presiding over the greatest crisis in modern royal history. In private moments with William, he spoke of abdication, feeling that his judgment had been so compromised that he could no longer effectively serve. William, showing the leadership that would define his future reign, counseled patience. The monarchy has survived because it adapts, Dad. This is our chance to show that no one is above accountability, not even us. That's what will restore faith, not running away from the mess. Catherine emerged as an unexpected pillar of strength during this period. She worked tirelessly behind the scenes to maintain stability for the younger royals, especially George, Charlotte, and Louis, who were old enough to understand that something serious was happening but young enough to be shielded from the worst details. She also reached out to Diana's family, the Spencers, who had long felt marginalized by the royal establishment. Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, met with William and Catherine privately, sharing his own documentation that corroborated much of what the inquiry was discovering. Your mother knew, Earl Spencer revealed. She documented everything she could, hoping that one day the truth would come out. She would be so proud of you, William, for having the courage she was denied. As the weeks turned to months, the inquiry's work continued. The British public, initially shocked and divided, began to coalesce around a new vision for the monarchy. One based on transparency and accountability, rather than divine right and unquestioned privilege. The final report of the inquiry was devastating in its conclusions. It confirmed systematic manipulation, media corruption, and deliberate psychological warfare against Diana. Several individuals were referred for criminal prosecution, though Camilla's deal protected her from this fate. On a rain-soaked morning in November, exactly 1 year after William had made his decision to speak out, the royal family gathered at Althorpe, Diana's childhood home and final resting place. It was a private ceremony, away from the cameras and crowds, where her sons could finally tell her that justice had been served. William spoke at her graveside, his words carried away by the wind but heard clearly by those who mattered most. "We've brought the truth to light, Mummy. It wasn't easy, and it's cost us dearly. But your grandchildren will grow up in a world where power doesn't mean the right to destroy those who stand in your way. You didn't die in vain. Your legacy is truth, and that truth has set us free." As the family departed Althorpe, a remarkable thing happened. The rain stopped, and for the first time in days, the sun broke through the clouds. It was as if Diana herself was giving her blessing to the new beginning that her sons had fought so hard to achieve. The monarchy would survive, forever changed but perhaps stronger for having faced its demons. William's courage in breaking his silence had cost him much. A stepmother, the innocence of his father's happiness, and the comfortable illusion that the institution he served was beyond reproach. But it had also given him something invaluable. The knowledge that when faced with a choice between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truths, he had chosen truth, and in doing so, he had not only honored his mother's memory but had also secured a more honest future for his own children, and for the institution they would one day inherit. Camilla, stripped of her titles and living in exile, would become a cautionary tale about the price of ambition unchecked by conscience. The queen consort who had schemed for decades to wear the crown had lost everything in her pursuit of it, and somewhere, in whatever realm the departed inhabit, Diana Spencer could finally rest in peace, vindicated at last by the son who had carried her truth in silence for so long but who had found, in the end, the courage to speak it aloud.